First contact and harsh reality. The human exploratory vessel Horizon drifted silently through the void, its massive engines powered down as it approached the colossal structure floating against the backdrop of an unfamiliar star system. Captain Elena Vargas stood on the bridge, her dark eyes fixed on the main view screen, taking in every detail of what appeared to be the largest space station humanity had ever encountered. "Are you recording all of this, Dr. Chen?" Elena asked, her voice steady despite the excitement building in her chest. "Every bit of it, Captain," replied Dr. Maya Chen, the ship's chief science officer. Her fingers danced across her console, adjusting sensors to gather as much data as possible. "The structure is approximately 25 kilometers in diameter. I'm detecting thousands of energy signatures and what appear to be hundreds of different vessels docked throughout its perimeter." Elena nodded, her short black hair shifting slightly with the movement. "Lieutenant Park, are you receiving any transmissions?" Communications Officer Jai Park adjusted his earpiece. "Yes, Captain. Multiple frequencies and communication protocols. The translation matrix is struggling. But wait, I'm receiving a direct hail. It's being transmitted on a frequency our systems can easily process." "They know we're here," muttered Security Chief Omar Nasri, his hand instinctively moving toward his sidearm. "That was always a possibility," Elena replied. "Put it through, Lieutenant." The view screen flickered, revealing a being that appeared vaguely humanoid, but with iridescent purple skin and eyes that were entirely black. It wore an ornate uniform adorned with symbols the humans couldn't recognize. "Unidentified vessel," the alien spoke, its mouth movements slightly out of sync with the translated words. "You have entered galactic assembly space. Identify your species and purpose immediately." Elena straightened her uniform and stepped forward. "I am Captain Elena Vargas of the United Earth ship Horizon. We are explorers from the planet Earth, seeking peaceful contact with other intelligent species." The alien's expression remained unreadable. "Earth is not registered in assembly records. Maintain your position. You will be boarded for inspection and classification." Before Elena could respond, the transmission ended. "Boarded." Omar's voice rose. "Captain, I recommend going to yellow alert." Elena shook her head. "No, we can't risk appearing hostile. This is first contact, and we're in their territory." She turned to address the entire bridge crew. "I understand everyone's concerns, but remember our mission. We're representatives of all humanity. Let's make a good impression." Within the hour, a small vessel docked with the Horizon. 4 different alien species emerged, led by the purple-skinned being from the transmission. They introduced themselves as representatives of the Galactic Assembly, a coalition of spacefaring civilizations that governed this sector of the galaxy. The leader, who identified himself as Coordinator Vexilor of the Azurian species, conducted a thorough inspection of the ship while questioning Elena and her officers about human technology, physiology, and history. "Your propulsion technology is primitive," Vexilor remarked as they toured the engine room. "Sublight only, no phase-shifting capabilities." Chief Engineer Ramirez bit her lip, clearly holding back a retort. Elena gave her a subtle nod of appreciation for maintaining composure. After 6 hours of inspection, the assembly representatives gathered with Elena and her senior staff in the conference room. "Based on our assessment," Vexilor announced, "we have classified humanity as a Tier 3 civilization." "What exactly does that mean?" Elena asked. "The assembly categorizes species based on technological advancement, spatial reach, and developmental maturity," another alien explained. This one resembled an upright feline with crystalline fur. "Tier 3 is limited." Vexilor slid a data tablet across the table. "These are the protocols for Tier 3 species interaction with the assembly. You may establish a diplomatic presence at the assembly station, but your trading rights and access to technology will be restricted." Elena reviewed the document, her expression darkening. "These terms are extremely restrictive. According to this, We would need to provide vast amounts of our resources in exchange for minimal technological exchange. That is correct, Vexlor stated without emotion. All developing species must progress through the appropriate tiers at the pace deemed suitable by the Assembly Council. And how long does it typically take to advance from Tier 3 to Tier 2? Dr. Chen asked. For most species, approximately 200 of your Earth years, the feline alien replied. The human officers exchanged concerned glances. We'll need time to review these terms and consult with our government, Alina said carefully. Of course, Vexlor responded. You have authorization to establish a preliminary outpost on Docking Ring 7 of Assembly Station. Your ship may remain there for 30 days while you consider the terms. After the Assembly representatives departed, Alina called an emergency meeting with her senior staff. 200 years at their mercy. Lieutenant Commander Ramirez exploded once the meeting room was secured. Their terms would drain Earth dry of resources while giving us scraps in return. Dr. Chen nodded in agreement. The technological exchange ratio is absurd. They're asking for rare Earth elements at quantities that would devastate our mining industry. It's more than unfair, Omar added. It's exploitative. And did you notice how they reacted when I asked about their defensive systems? Complete shutdown. Alina paced the conference room, considering their options. We need more information before we report back to Earth Command. Let's use our 30-day window to learn everything we can about this assembly and how it actually operates. The next 3 weeks proved illuminating. Alina split her crew into teams, each tasked with gathering specific intelligence while maintaining the appearance of awestruck newcomers simply amazed by the wonders of the assembly station. Dr. Chen focused on technological assessment, Lieutenant Park on communications and cultural exchange, Security Chief Nasri on mapping power structures, and Chief Engineer Ramirez on covertly analyzing available technology. Alina herself worked on building relationships, particularly with representatives of other Tier 3 and Tier 2 species. What she discovered disturbed her deeply. They're trapped, Alina reported during a secure briefing with her officers. The Volari have been Tier 2 for over 3 centuries with no path to advancement. The Krell have been providing temporary resource tributes for 500 years. The Assembly systematically ensures that lower-tier species remain dependent. I've confirmed similar patterns in their communication protocols, Park added. The translation matrices provided to lower-tier species are deliberately limited, keeping certain diplomatic and technical terms untranslatable. Ramirez slammed her fist on the table. It's a rigged system. They take what they want from developing worlds while maintaining their technological advantage. And enforcement? Alina asked, turning to Omar. Strict, he replied grimly. Any species that violates their tire restrictions faces immediate sanctions, including orbital blockades and, in extreme cases, what they euphemistically call developmental reset targeted strikes against infrastructure. Alina stood at the viewport, watching the endless stream of ships coming and going from the massive station. So we have 3 options: accept their terms and subject Earth to centuries of exploitation, reject their terms and potentially face isolation or worse. Or what, Captain? Dr. Chen asked. Alina turned, a determined glint in her eyes. Or we do what humans have always done when faced with impossible odds. We change the rules of the game. The next day, Alina requested a meeting with representatives from several Tier 2 and Tier 3 species. She chose a location in the commercial sector of Docking Ring 7, away from the main assembly administrative centers. What I'm about to propose involves risk, Alina told the gathered aliens, speaking through their limited translation devices. But it also offers opportunity for all of us. The assembly monitors all unauthorized meetings, warned a reptilian Krell representative. We should not be seen together. Actually, we should, Alina replied with a smile. According to Section 17 of the Tier 3 protocols, developing species are encouraged to establish cultural exchange programs with peer civilizations. A legitimate cover, murmured a Volari diplomat, their bioluminescent tendrils pulsing with interest. Clever. Over the next week, under the guise of cultural exchange, Alina and her officers laid out their plan. By the time the 30-day window was nearing its end, they had established a network of contacts and a framework for what Alina called the human solution. On the 29th day, Coordinator Vexlor requested Alina's decision regarding the assembly terms. The people of Earth are honored by the Assembly's offer, Alina stated formally in the Assembly's diplomatic chamber. However, we find the current terms insufficient for our needs. Vexlor's black eyes narrowed. That is unfortunate. Without accepted terms, you cannot establish formal relations with the Assembly. Your vessel must depart Assembly space within 48 hours. We understand, Alina replied, her expression neutral. However, before we depart, I would like to formally register a human trading company under Section 42 of the Commercial Code. Section 42. Vexlor seemed momentarily confused. That section pertains to independent trading entities operating within assembly space. It is not applicable to Tier 3 species without formal relations. Alina smiled. Actually, sir, if you review subparagraph 7, you'll find that non-affiliated entities may register for limited trading rights provided they operate through a recognized intermediary and adhere to safety and quality standards. She slid a data tablet across the table. We've already secured agreements with 3 Tier 2 trading guilds to act as our intermediaries. All documentation is in order. Vexlor scanned the document, his purple skin darkening with what Alina assumed was anger or concern. This is irregular. The Assembly Council will need to review this application. Of course, Alina replied smoothly. And while they're reviewing it, perhaps they could also examine these historical trading records we've compiled. She transmitted another file to Vexlor's terminal. The alien's eyes widened as he scrolled through the data. Where did you obtain this information? He demanded. It's all publicly available in the Assembly's own archives, Alina explained. We simply organized it to show the resource flow patterns over the last 5 centuries. Fascinating trends, wouldn't you agree? The data clearly showed how Tier 1 species systematically extracted resources from lower tiers while providing minimal technological exchange in return, a pattern that violated the Assembly's own founding principles of mutual advancement and prosperity. Captain Vargas, Vexlor said, his voice lowered. I suggest you reconsider your position. The path you're choosing could have significant consequences for your species. Alina leaned forward, her voice equally quiet but firm. We humans have a saying, Coordinator. Don't make threats you're not prepared to back up. We've transmitted copies of this analysis to 17 different diplomatic missions. Any action against Earth would only confirm what this data suggests, that the Assembly is not the benevolent coalition it claims to be. She stood, straightening her uniform. We'll await the Council's decision on our trading company registration. In the meantime, the Horizon will depart as requested. But we'll be back, Coordinator. Humans always find a way back. As Alina walked out of the diplomatic chamber, she activated her secure communicator. Phase 1 complete, she said quietly. Initiate Phase 2. The Horizon departed from Assembly Station the next day, but Alina knew this was just the beginning. Humanity had been presented with an impossible situation, but if there was one thing humans excelled at throughout their history, it was beating impossible odds. And the Galactic Assembly was about to learn exactly what happened when humans decided to take what they wanted, and no one could stop them. The human solution. 6 months after the Horizon's departure from Assembly Station, a small fleet of 7 Earth vessels approached the fringes of Assembly space. Unlike the exploratory vessel that had made first contact, these ships were retrofitted cargo haulers, their holds filled with resources specifically selected based on the intelligence gathered during their first encounter. Captain Alina Vargas stood on the bridge of the lead vessel, now renamed Freedom. The past 6 months had been a whirlwind of diplomatic maneuvering, resource allocation, and strategy sessions with Earth's leadership. What had begun as a first contact mission had evolved into something much more ambitious, a plan to challenge the very foundation of the Assembly's exploitative hierarchy. Assembly Border Patrol is hailing us, Lieutenant Park announced from his communication station. Right on schedule, Elena replied. Open a channel. The view screen flickered to life, revealing the now familiar purple features of an Azurian officer, though not Vexilor. Human vessels, identify yourselves and state your purpose. Elena stepped forward. This is Captain Elena Vargas of the Earth Trading Consortium. We have registered business at Assembly Station under Commercial Code Section 42, operating through the Voleri Trading Guild as our intermediary. The Azurian consulted his data terminal, clearly surprised. Your registration appears to be in order. Proceed to designated coordinates for cargo inspection. As the transmission ended, Dr. Chen approached Elena. They approved our registration. I thought the Assembly Council would find some way to block it. Elena smiled. They tried. But it turns out that when you distribute evidence of systematic exploitation to 17 diplomatic missions, certain council members become concerned about their public image. Besides, we're not just any trading company. We're the thin edge of the wedge. The Earth fleet docked at Assembly Station 2 days later. As Elena predicted, they were assigned to the outermost docking ring, far from the prestigious central hubs reserved for higher-tier species. But location didn't matter for their purposes. Access did. Over the next 3 weeks, the human crews implemented what Elena had dubbed Operation Turnabout. On the surface, they conducted legitimate trading activities through their Voleri intermediaries, exchanging Earth resources for modest technological components within their approved tier restrictions. Behind this facade of compliance, however, a more complex network was taking shape. The Krell representatives have confirmed their participation. Security Chief Omar reported during a secure meeting in Elena's quarters. They'll begin rerouting their mineral exports through our secondary channels next month. Elena nodded, examining the complex diagram displayed on her secure tablet. And the Nexusi? Still hesitant, Dr. Chen replied. They're concerned about Assembly reprisals, but they're watching our progress closely. They'll come around, Elena said confidently, especially after Phase 3 begins. Phase 3 launched exactly 1 month after their arrival. A human delegation, led by Elena herself, requested a formal economic summit with representatives from 12 Tier 2 and Tier 3 species. The official purpose: discussing standardization of resource quality metrics across developing worlds. The actual agenda was far more revolutionary. The current system is designed to keep us dependent, Elena explained to the gathered aliens in a secure conference chamber. The room had been swept for surveillance devices 3 times before the meeting. We've all been playing by rules created to benefit the established powers. It's time we created our own rules. She activated a holographic display showing a star chart with highlighted trade routes. We've identified 17 key resources that Tier 1 species require but cannot efficiently produce themselves. Currently, they acquire these at predatory rates from our worlds. But what if we collectively renegotiated those rates? Impossible. A Nexusi delegate chittered nervously. The Assembly would never agree to more favorable terms. They don't have to agree, Elena countered. They just have to accept reality. If we coordinate our production and distribution, creating a united front, they'll have no choice. You're proposing a cartel. A Volari representative observed, their luminous tendrils pulsing with what Elena had learned to recognize as excitement. I prefer to call it the Free Species Coalition, Elena replied with a smile. And it's completely legal under Assembly Commercial Code Section 58, which permits affiliated entities to standardize quality and pricing models. But such affiliations are meant for businesses, not species, the Krell delegate pointed out. Which is why each of our governments will charter special trading companies, Elena explained. Legally separate entities that happen to coordinate closely. Nothing in the Assembly Code forbids it. I've had 27 Earth lawyers scrutinizing every word of their regulations. The proposal sparked intense debate, But by the end of the summit, 9 species had tentatively agreed to join the coalition. Within 3 months, that number had grown to 14, representing nearly 30% of the Assembly's resource supply chain. The effects were soon felt throughout assembly space. Prices for critical resources began to rise as the coalition implemented standardized pricing models that reflected the true value of their goods rather than the artificially depressed rates the Assembly had imposed for centuries. The response came swifter than even Alina had anticipated. "Captain," Lieutenant Park called out urgently one morning, "Assembly security vessels are moving into position around all coalition ships. They're ordering immediate compliance with new emergency trade regulations." Alina had expected this. "Send our prepared response, and alert all coalition partners to implement Contingency Omega." Contingency Omega was the riskiest part of their strategy. A coordinated withdrawal of all coalition vessels from assembly space, along with an immediate embargo on the 17 critical resources they controlled. Within hours, the situation escalated to a full diplomatic crisis. The Assembly Council convened an emergency session and summoned Alina as the coalition's de facto spokesperson. The council chamber was imposing, a vast circular room with tiered seating ascending toward a domed ceiling adorned with holographic representations of countless star systems. The 23 council members, all from Tier 1 species, looked down at Alina from their elevated positions. High Counselor Genvar, an ancient Azurian with skin so dark purple it appeared almost black, spoke first. "Captain Vargas, you have orchestrated a direct challenge to the economic stability of assembly space. These actions cannot be permitted to continue." Alina stood tall, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber. "With respect, High Counselor, we have violated no assembly laws. We have simply exercised our rights under the Commercial Code to fair compensation for our resources. You have manipulated regulations intended to foster cooperative trade," another counselor accused. "We've applied them exactly as written," Alina countered. "If the Assembly finds the results uncomfortable, perhaps the regulations should be reconsidered, with input from all tiers, not just Tier 1 species." Genvar's expression darkened. "The tier system exists for good reason, Captain. Lesser developed species lack the perspective and responsibility to wield greater influence." Alina raised an eyebrow. "Lesser developed? Our coalition members have achieved spaceflight, unified their planets, and built sustainable civilizations. What exactly makes them lesser except your desire to control their resources?" Murmurs spread through the observation gallery, where representatives from dozens of species watched the proceedings. "This discussion is pointless," declared another counselor, a massive being with translucent skin through which complex circulatory systems were visible. "The Assembly has authorized military action to seize control of critical resource production facilities if this illegal embargo continues." A tense silence fell over the chamber. This was the moment Alina had prepared for, the Assembly's ultimate threat, deployed as she had predicted. Military action would violate the Assembly's founding charter, Alina stated calmly. Specifically, Article 3, which prohibits the use of force against member or affiliated worlds except in cases of imminent existential threat. "Economic stability is essential to," the counselor began, but Alina cut him off. "And such action would require a unanimous council vote," she continued, "which you do not have." She gestured toward one particular counselor, a crystalline entity representing the Arcosian Collective, one of the oldest Tier 1 species. The Arcosians have extensive historical records, including documentation of how they themselves were once subjected to similar economic exploitation before achieving Tier 1 status. They understand the long-term damage such systems cause. The Arcosian counselor's crystalline surface shimmered, their equivalent of a nod. "The Coalition has already transmitted comprehensive evidence of systematic exploitation to every diplomatic mission in assembly space," Alina continued. "Military action would only confirm what that evidence suggests, that the Assembly maintains power through force rather than mutual benefit." She stepped closer to the center of the chamber. We don't want conflict. We want fairness. The coalition proposes a 3-point reform program. First, transparent tier advancement criteria with defined timelines. Second, standardized resource exchange rates based on objective value rather than tier status. Third, proportional representation on regulatory committees for all tiers. Impossible, scoffed Genvar. Such changes would undermine the very foundation of the assembly. Only the exploitative parts, Elena replied. The assembly was founded on principles of cooperation and mutual advancement, principles buried under centuries of bureaucracy and self-interest. We're offering a chance to return to those ideals. She gazed around the chamber, addressing not just the council, but the hundreds of observers from all tiers. But make no mistake, if the assembly chooses conflict, the coalition is prepared. Our embargo will continue indefinitely. Your economies will suffer far more damage than military action could possibly justify. You would hold the entire assembly hostage, demanded a counselor. We would stand firm against injustice, Elena corrected. Humans have a long history of doing so, even against seemingly insurmountable odds. And we're not alone anymore. The debate raged for hours, with council members arguing vehemently against the proposed reforms. But as the economic impact of the embargo began to ripple through assembly space, with reports of production disruptions and resource shortages already affecting several Tier 1 worlds, the political calculus began to shift. After 3 days of continuous emergency sessions, the council called for a recess to consider their options. Elena used this time to strengthen the coalition's position, meeting with representatives from species who had previously remained neutral. The assembly will attempt to divide us, she warned during a coalition meeting. They'll offer special terms to some, hoping to break our united front. We must stand firm. When the council reconvened, they presented a counterproposal, minor adjustments to exchange rates, and a promise to review tier advancement criteria. Elena rejected it immediately. Half measures and vague promises are insufficient. The coalition stands by our original proposal. The standoff continued for another week. Assembly security vessels maintained position around coalition ships, while coalition members upheld their embargo. Tension grew throughout assembly space as supply chains faltered and prices soared. Then came the turning point. The Arcosian councillor formally broke ranks with the rest of the council, publicly supporting the coalition's reform proposals. 2 other councillors followed, citing economic necessity. Faced with a fracturing council and mounting economic pressure, High Councillor Genvar requested a private meeting with Elena. You've caused quite the disturbance, Captain, the ancient Azurian remarked as they met in a neutral diplomatic chamber. Necessary growing pains, Elena replied. The assembly has been stagnant for too long. Genvar studied her with ancient eyes. Your species has accomplished in months what others failed to achieve in centuries. How? Elena considered the question carefully. Humans have always excelled at identifying and exploiting systemic weaknesses. Throughout our history, we've faced empires and hierarchies that seemed unassailable, until they weren't. And once you've dismantled our system, what then? We build a better one, Elena said simply. Together, as equals. The Azurian was silent for a long moment. The Council will accept a modified version of your proposals. Tier advancement criteria will be standardized and transparent. Exchange rates will be adjusted to more equitable levels, and a new advisory board with representatives from all tiers will be established to review assembly regulations. And military action is officially off the table, Elena added firmly. Genvar nodded slowly. Agreed. 3 days later, the Assembly Council formally announced the reforms. The embargo was lifted, and coalition ships resumed normal operations within assembly space, though now with considerably more influence and respect than before. As news of the agreement spread, Elena received a private message from Earth Command. The text was brief but clear. Mission accomplished. Return authorized. But Elena had one more task before departing. She requested a meeting with representatives from every species that had joined the coalition. They gathered in a large conference chamber on Assembly Station, no longer relegated to the outer rings, but given a proper diplomatic space. What we've achieved is just the beginning, Elena told the assembled delegates. The reforms create opportunity, but it's up to us to ensure they're properly implemented. She activated a holographic display showing a new organizational structure. The Free Species Coalition transformed from a temporary alliance into a permanent cooperative body. Earth proposes establishing a formal coalition council to coordinate our ongoing efforts and ensure our collective voices remain unified, she explained, not to replace the assembly, but to balance it. The proposal received immediate support. Within hours, the framework for the new council was established, with Elena nominated as its first chairperson. I'm honored, she told them, but this position should rotate among all coalition members. No single species should dominate. That's the mistake the assembly made. As the meeting concluded, Dr. Chen approached Elena. Earth Command wants us to return, but it seems we have a new mission here. Elena nodded, looking out at the vast expanse of Assembly Station, a structure built over centuries by dozens of species, yet controlled by a select few until humans arrived and changed everything. Command will understand, she replied. What we've started here is too important to abandon halfway. 6 months after their initial rejection of assembly terms, humanity had not only secured its place in the galactic community, but had fundamentally altered the balance of power. The exploitative tier system was being dismantled, replaced by a more equitable framework built on mutual respect rather than dominance. As Elena stood at the viewport in her new office, watching ships from all tiers moving freely through assembly space, she reflected on how quickly everything had changed. Humans had been presented with an impossible situation: accept exploitation or face isolation, and had instead forged a third path, as they always did when confronted with unacceptable choices. The Galactic Assembly had learned a lesson that numerous Earth empires and powers had discovered throughout human history. When humans decide to take what they want, in this case, equality and fair treatment, very little can stop them. And the galaxy would never be the same again.